Cool. All right. So then I will call this meeting of the Public Works Commission to order and start off with a quick roll call. So just let me know when you're here when I call your name. Commissioner Ellis.
Here.
Commissioner Crowley.
Here.
Commissioner Morgan.
Here.
Commissioner Wernz.
Here.
Commissioner Collette. Commissioner Lockett. Commissioner Cross. All right, so with that, we can move on to the next item of business, which is the approval of the minutes from our last regular meeting on November 2nd, 2022. And with that, I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I would move to approve the minutes of our November 2, 2022 meeting.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
This is Commissioner Morgan. I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. All right, and then next up on our agenda is the Boise Municipal Irrigation District 2023 assessment. And with that, I will turn it over to staff.
Chair, thank you for the introduction. And the first item is related to the Boise Municipal Irrigation District and making sure that on an annual basis that we're having the assessment approved by the commission. And I believe it then goes to council, correct, John? Okay, so I'll turn it over to John Gunnarsson, and he's going to make the presentation for the Boise Municipal Irrigation District assessment.
Thank you, Steve. Chair, members of the commission, good afternoon. My name is John Gunnarsson. I coordinate our geothermal program and our pressure irrigation program. Today, I'm here seeking recommendations to move forward with establishing our 2023 irrigation assessment rates and budget. Some of the information that I'm going to be sharing here on the next slide, it is a little repetitive from prior years, but there is some new stuff, so just bear with me here. So I'm going to start here by explaining why we are in the irrigation business. In the early 1990s, as West Boise was fastly developing, our city council was getting very concerned that we were losing surface water rights and these water rights were not being protected. So then it was later in the decade in 1997, the Irrigation Commission was formed and an ordinance was adopted that basically made it mandatory for new developments to provide pressure irrigation when surface water rights are available. It mandated that these pressure irrigation systems either be managed by the irrigation entity, by an established HOA, or by the city of Boise. The majority of the systems that were developed are managed by HOAs or by the irrigation entities, but in cases where there is no established HOA or it's too far off the canal system for the irrigation company, then the city is selected to oversee maintenance of these. In 2001, the city started overseeing the first system. This number has been growing ever since, and today we are now serving 13 separate subdivisions. That equates to 365 lots, providing reliable pressure irrigation water to just over 55 acres. As you can see on the map here, all 13 of these subdivisions are in West Boise, kind of located near the 5 Mile Fairview area. We are still actively growing this program. We currently annex about 1 new subdivision each year. And as we annex these recent annexations have really improved our economies of scale with pressure irrigation. So for example, it's roughly the same cost to provide pressure irrigation to a 20 lot subdivision as it would be to a 100 lot subdivision of running the pumps in the delivery system. In 2021, 2 years ago, we annexed a new subdivision, Arenal subdivision, which connected onto an existing pump station, basically serving an additional 65 lots with very minimal additional costs to us. Last year, we annexed 3 new subdivisions, 3 existing subdivisions new to our system. And these three subdivisions were adjacent to our existing Bradford Greystone system. As you can see on the map, the bottom three subdivisions were existing Bradford Greystone, Greystone number 2, and we annexed the Azure Meadows 1, 2, and 3, which were contiguous to our existing subdivision. Now, when we annexed these, we did take on a couple extra pump stations, but what we're doing here is we're setting ourselves up for this economy of scale where we can start interconnecting these systems, provide regional pump stations, and ultimately provide service at a lower cost to the residents. So we're still growing these PI systems, but besides continuing to grow these, we're also reviewing other growth options. And one of these other options that we're evaluating is the operation of certain laterals that provide gravity irrigation water to properties. So let me start by putting some context around what a lateral is. So here in Boise, looking at the diagram here on the screen, here in Boise, irrigation companies divert water from the river. This water is then transported through a series of canals. They have main canals and they have branch canals. The main canal, branch canals, they should have been highlighted blue. You can't really see it too well on the screen, but it's the bigger delivery systems here. But now once the water leaves these irrigation canals, the irrigation company's jurisdiction ends. And then these major and minor laterals in between are managed separately. Some of these user laterals have established lateral associations to maintain it, but many we are finding do not. Here, to put this in perspective, let's look a little bit closer at Boise, something we're all familiar with. So on the screen, you'll see a map of the East Treasure Valley and what is showing all of the canal networks that are delivering this irrigation water. I'm going to use my cursor here. You can see the larger canals. These are the main canals, like the Sudlers, the Reidenbach, the New York. We've all seen these canals on our daily drives. In fact, here's kind of a picture of what we would expect to see a major canal. Then, as we look back at the map, off of these major canals are the minor canals. These are much more common and they deliver water from these main canals into neighborhoods. And here's a similar picture of some of these minor canals, also something that we're probably all very familiar with. Now, keep in mind, both these major and minor canals, these are operated and maintained by irrigation companies. But now what's not shown on this map is coming off of these minor canals is how the water gets into the subdivisions or onto properties. And that is the laterals. Here are some pictures of some examples of laterals. These are typically very small delivery systems. Some of these are open channel. Some of these are piped. Some of these are on a rotation. These laterals, they vary in size, kind of depending on how many properties they serve. But what we're finding are many of these laterals lack proper management, if any management at all, and they're at risk of falling into disrepair. And when these laterals fall into disrepair, ultimately, they're unable to deliver water to the properties. For a little context, for any of those that were with us back in 2007, you may recall that the city attempted an LID for the Lindsay lateral, which was a lateral up on the bench, which fell into disrepair. And but long story short, ultimately, we could not get enough support to get all the residents on board to fund the capital improvements needed to make the repairs. The concern we have here is when properties lose access to the surface water, they may or will convert over to treated domestic Veolia water or well water. Either one, basically, ultimately, further straining our groundwater supplies, groundwater resources to provide irrigation water. Now, I'm not going to talk too much more about laterals here. John Roldan's team and I, we're doing more investigation on these laterals, what they're serving, their status, and I suspect you'll be hearing a lot more about these here in the future.
Yeah, John, I was going to interrupt. John Roldan is our strategic water resources manager, and we're working with John Gunnarsson. We're trying to figure out maybe a best approach for looking at these lateral systems and what we might want to take on, not take on, kind of what's the status of the various lateral systems. So we'll be back in front of you with some kind of bigger picture analysis of what we found, and then some recommendations that we'd like to hear some feedback on, probably in the next year or so, but we're trying to work through systematically, like how do we start to make some decisions on whether we'd want to start getting into taking on some of the laterals that are falling into disrepair.
Thanks, Steve. So now bringing us back to why we're here tonight, back to the pressure irrigation side of it, the business we're currently doing. In order to provide pressure irrigation water to our residents, we assess the properties that receive the water. We assess them the cost to operate our systems. These costs, they include the irrigation district and drainage assessments, any repairs and maintenance that we're doing, operational cost, cross charges, indirects, depreciation. And then what we do is the total cost here, we divide by the total number of acres that we serve, which gives us an assessment rate per acre. This equates to $935 per acre. And that is our recommendation of the assessment rate for 2023. This assessment rate is unchanged from last year. In fact, the last time it changed was in 2018 with a 4.5% increase. So it's been 5 years since the last rate change. Also, this estimated rate that we have at $935 per acre is estimated to be about 51% cheaper than if you were to irrigate your yard with Veolia water. So as the next step in the formal process, which we follow, it's defined by state statute, is for City Council to formally set this assessment rate. The prepared motion I have up here is a recommendation from the commission to mayor and council to adopt this assessment rate of $935 per acre. And with that, I will stand for any questions.
Awesome, thank you. Any questions from the commission? Commissioner Crowley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hey, John, it's good to see you. The question on how you collect your proposed assessment and the existing assessment on a per lot basis. Do you bill on a per lot, or how do you collect the revenues that you're showing on your budget?
Commissioner Crowley, thank you for the question. Chair, commissioners, we assess our properties on a per acre basis. So we have this rate of $935 per acre, and that is applied to whatever the lot size is of your property. When we make our calculation for the cost savings compared to using treated Veolia water, we do take into account that an entire lot is not irrigable, that there is a structure, there is sidewalks, there is driveway. So we have a calculation in there to make a comparison of irrigable acres to non-irrigable acres. When we make that comparison, but Commissioner Lauer, to answer your question, our assessments are based on a per acre and applied appropriately to each lot.
And then John, clarification, we bill through utility billing on a per property basis.
We are not quite through utility billing yet.
Yeah.
Right now, Carrie Kirkpatrick is still doing it.
Yeah. So we do bill, Commissioner Crowley, we do bill on a property basis, like per property basis, through our accounts payable.
Sure.
In Public Works.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Councilmember Willetts.
Thank you. I have a question that I want to piggyback onto Commissioner Crowley. So I just want to make sure that with this rate increase, is there any sort of additional charge that will be there, like an add-on charge, or is it whatever the new fee is the new fee? There's not a flow-through charge at all.
Chair, commissioners, to be clear, there is no rate increase proposed this year. This assessment rate is the same that has been for the last 5 years. When we look at what our assessment rate covers, there is the irrigation district and drainage assessments. That is a pass-through. That is a cost that is applied to a property, but the irrigation companies send it to me. I include it in our assessments and then pass it on to the property. So there is a combination of pass-through funds, but then there's also the city operation cost on there as well.
Got it. Thank you so much for that clarification.
No problem.
Commissioner Lockett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is about the same slide, if I could, please. So we talked about 2018 and a rate of $895. Prior to that, when was the rate increase. A little more history back a few years would be helpful for me. Do you have that today by chance?
Chair, Commissioners, I do not have that with me today. That's something that we can get for you and provide. But I would like to clarify, when this last rate increase was made in 2018, prior to that, this entire fund was being supplemented by the general fund. This was not a self-sufficient fund up till 2018. We did this rate increase in 2018, which made us self-sufficient. Prior to this, all depreciation, cross charges, and indirects were being supported by the city's general fund. Now this is a self-sustaining fund. And because we're continuing to grow it and get these economies of scale, that's why we're not having to increase our assessment rate right now. As I'm connecting new subdivisions to existing lift stations, we get this economy of scale. We are actually, our ending balance each year is getting more and more each year. We may be in the position at some point to even have a rate decrease as we keep growing the economies of scale here.
So thank you. I appreciate that. Though it was supplemented by the general fund, I just want to make sure I understand that was still assessed at the per acre rate for individuals. And so I don't know if there was an average, or I guess we could follow up. I'm a little hesitant to approve a motion, vote on a motion today without that history, but I wonder, how significant it was. Though it was a different fund, it's still a cost to that individual citizen. And so that's kind of the information I was looking for.
Absolutely. We will follow up with you. We will get a copy of our past rates since we initiated this program in 2007.
Okay.
And we can trend that and see what that looks like.
Thank you, John. I'd appreciate it. And I like what you said about watching the cash flow. I think that's the right thing to do if you build up sufficient cash balance to where we could have a decrease. I mean, you've got your eye on it, and that's the most important thing, but I am interested in the history. So thank you.
No problem. Thank you.
Any other questions from the commission? Anyone in the council chambers there?
Yes, Chair, this is Commissioner Wernz. I do have a question.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Gunnarsson, I was looking at the background materials. Thank you for the memo. And I wasn't totally understanding, I think, the revenue and expenses line, and that top line item on BIMD assessments, the actual was 59,689, I think.
Okay.
And why, when you have the same number of users or connections, would the budget be different in 23? It showed a reduction in the budget from that. I didn't quite get that.
I would have to, I do not have that in front of me, but I believe the budget from 22 included these new lots that were annexed in already. And so the budget for 23 is essentially carrying the same revenue.
Okay, it just doesn't indicate that on this memo, or at least the way I'd read it. So, okay.
I think another way about this is we do anticipate to see higher revenues, of course, as we annex these new properties, new subdivisions come on. We're going to have increased revenues and ideally not as increased expenses as well. Of course, they're going to go up, but at a slower rate than revenues.
Chair, Commissioner Lawrence, we'll take a look at the number on the revenue side. What may have happened is what you're looking at in FY22 are the actuals that may have been actually higher than what we had budgeted in 22. Mm-hmm. And so then what we have budgeted in 23 was built on the budget for 22, not the actuals, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So okay. Let's go back and take a look at it.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any other questions or comments from the commission? All right. Hearing none, we do have a suggested motion. And if it pleases the commission, I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, this is Commissioner Wernz. I move that the commission, yeah, I've got it right here. Yeah, I move that for the approval of the recommendation to the mayor and council for the Boise Municipal Irrigation District assessment rate of $935 per acre for the 2023 water year, unchanged from the previous year.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Motion and second. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. Thank you.
And thank you. And as a next step, we will now be taking this to city council, who will approve this assessment rate. And then we'll be sending assessments out in March. Water gets turned on in April, and we'll start operating our irrigation systems as water becomes available.
And we'll follow up with the two questions, one on the rate changes over the past years, and then confirming the FY23 budget versus the FY22 actuals. I think the actuals came in higher than the budget, so we probably budgeted a lower number. So let me just go back and check them.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm sure those will be helpful for the council in their deliberations as well. All right. Up next on our agenda is the 2023 Department Priorities Overview, and I will turn it over to staff.
Sure. Thank you. We wanted to follow up. We kind of started rushing through a presentation at the end of the last commission meeting, and reflecting upon that, we probably should have just stopped and waited for this particular meeting. So we wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about the priorities for 2023. And this is a topic of discussion amongst the leadership team to make sure that we're all clear on kind of what projects would take priorities over other projects as we're going through the fiscal year. And to provide some context, first column is going to give you the presentation of a couple of slides up front about kind of the public works business. A couple of you have seen those slides before. And then we're going to move into maybe a bigger picture look at some of the things we're looking at, like what are we driving to? So when we talk about specific priorities in a fiscal year, they don't just exist in some vacuum. They're all leading to something. So I'll spend a little bit of time providing some context to that, and then give you another look at the FY23 priorities, and we can talk through that and see if you have any questions. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Colin Hickman, who's going to kick us off.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, Chair, Commission members, nice to see you all. Nice to be in front of you again. And as Steve mentioned, we felt it was important to make sure that we spent some time bringing this back around, because it is a big topic. There's a lot here, really, to give you an overview of the scope of work in front of us, but also the breadth and depth of what we have in front of us this year and over the coming years. So as Steve mentioned, some of the first slides might seem a bit repetitive, but we felt it was important to start from the beginning. I won't belabor any of the ones that you've already seen, but then Steve and I will jointly present this. I'll turn it over to Steve to walk through the actual priorities. I'll set some context up at the front and then provide some kind of wrap up next steps at the very end. As many of you remember, probably back from November, I think it's important not just to put up there a slide that says, here's our priorities for the year, but also set the context, the framework around why these priorities. And I think an important place to start is just that the evolution of what we know public works is rapidly evolving. Not only has it been evolving, but by a day by day, weekly, monthly basis, it's changing in front of us. And you can see the bullets there in front of you, but take a topic like climate change, and you think about the complexity that challenge has, and the way that we go about addressing that issue. Also, just the volume of work in front of us. I think Public Works has been viewed as a department that is able to execute not only on the big innovative ideas, but also the day-to-day run the important critical services that we deliver to our residents. So with that responsibility comes more and more volume of work. The topic areas are growing, expanding, getting more intricate and complex. So again, thinking about maybe moving from trash and recycling and water to now energy, and now to, as Steve mentioned, setting water portfolios, and with the climate and everything that goes along with that. The topic areas are expanding as well. And I think importantly as well is just the community perception. Our residents, businesses look to Public Works as stewards of our resources. And so as that perception continues to grow and evolve, we need to evolve with that. And so what we talk a lot about is what got us here won't get us to where we need to go. And as Steve pointed out in the last meeting, that's not a a negative of the past or where we've been. In fact, what we have done in the past has brought us here today and has been very successful, but rather a recognition of the bullets above, that we need to continue to evolve in the way that we set our priorities and the way that we do our work to address a lot of these evolving areas. So the world as we know it, you think about a lot of the areas that Public Works is heavily involved in. And as you take down this list, all of these are in some level of flux. So you think about energy and with battery storage and with renewables, it is an industry and a topic that is in a high degree of flux. You think about water, it's I can't remember the last time I've read a newspaper or seen the news where there isn't a story about drought, water scarcity in the West, some really challenging opportunities, but also some opportunities that are presenting themselves, such as water recycling that we talk about as well. Trash and recycling, which perhaps may have seemed static, is certainly no longer there with with the shift and evolution and what is recyclable, what's not, with the compost program, with the shift, and I'll talk about it here in a little bit, to reduce and reuse approach. It's an industry and an area that is absolutely in a dynamic space right now. Transportation, with where we're moving on the electrification of vehicles, charging stations, and all that goes along with that infrastructure. And then facilities management. So even thinking through the way that we build and plan for our facilities has changed even since COVID and the pandemic. So now we must take into account, how many hybrid workers are there? How many, what does that do to our space planning? But not only that, it's how we go about building facilities, and no longer is it, where is it just going to be located, but what's the energy envelope? How tight is it? How energy efficient is the building? Do we use renewables? And so even in facilities management, we're seeing a lot of flux in that area as well. And the last slide before I turn it over to Steve is just some of the issues that we're grappling with on a daily basis are really dynamic. So I know I talked in November a little bit about this, and I won't go through it in a lot of detail, but essentially for many years, a lot of the material we deal with was once considered waste. So think about wastewater, think about the materials that used to go to the landfill. So we're taking materials out of wastewater and turning them into products, whether that's biosolids at the farm, whether that's creating a fertilizer with struvite, whether that's creating clean water at the end of our process. But also you look at the compost program where all of those materials were bound for the landfill, and now we're creating a viable product out of them. As I touched on a bit earlier, this shift in thinking on reduce and reuse has been a really exciting topic in the department that we've been looking at. And the way that we're approaching it is, rather than being a passive recipient of materials that now we have to deal with, how do we take some of these efforts and take this conversation, take our work upstream so that we're able to actually reduce the amount of waste that is coming to us that is then needed to be managed? How do we look at ways that we can reuse materials in new and different ways? I touched on renewable energy a little bit, but you think of everything from a green tariff to renewables to the way that this market, that this industry is going, and this sector is incredibly dynamic. Our climate team, grapples with a lot of these issues, and our partners with Idaho Power constantly. You look at infrastructure aging out. So whether it's West Boise Water Renewal Facility, the work that is currently happening at Lander Street Water Renewal Facility, but also the more unseen infrastructure under the ground. So thinking about the geothermal system, the pipes, the collection system, the miles and miles of pipes that we have below the city, below our streets. A lot of these pieces of infrastructure are starting to reach the end of their useful life. And so it's starting to be the time when we have to really start to repair and replace a lot of this infrastructure. New financing tools and approaches. So working with, whether it's partners at EPA, whether it's the bond, water renewal bond that many of you are well aware of, just how do we embrace, how do we utilize and leverage these new tools that are available to us to finance? And then lastly, I've touched a little on climate, but certainly with all the challenges that comes with that, there's also a lot of opportunities developing new partners, whether it's Idaho National Lab to you look at the Watershed, who's working to become the first water and climate science center in the country. It also presents an incredible opportunity for the city to develop some new innovative approaches in the work that we tackle. So with that, I will pass it over to Steve to give you a bit more context on how we're thinking about our priorities, and then present the priorities after that.
Thanks, Colin. I wanted to provide some context, and these are some slides that I've been sharing with staff. I've been doing some all hands with Public Works staff, trying to get folks up to speed on what's coming in, reviewing 22 and our successes, but also talking about what's coming in FY23. And part of this is making sure that the staff understands, and that, you know, as the commission as well, that you all understand that these are all leading somewhere, right? When we say that we have a priority to get something done in FY23, it's not as if we just sit kind of around a table like, what do we want to do this year? It's very much a vision for where do we want to go, and how do these projects lead to some outcome? How does ABC lead to Z, right? And kind of how we've looked at cities, this is getting really high level philosophically, but I think this is helpful in understanding kind of where some of those FY23 priorities are. When we look at cities over the past 50 to 60 years, they've really been built around this kind of a linear metabolism. If you think of a city as a living thing, it brings things in, it uses it, and then there's a waste product, right? And so you can look on the slide, there's water, there's food, there's energy, that are products that comes into a city, we acquire it, we use it, we consume it, and then there's a waste product that is associated with it. And this is really how cities have been set up. And we've been discussing within Public Works and the city writ large, there's an implication, like the word sustainable means a lot to a lot of people. And I think it's kind of in many ways overused. And in this context, it maybe suggests that somehow this is sustainable. We can sustain this model. And I think our perspective is that we can't, that there's going to take system-wide changes to address some of the big challenges that are coming to us, coming at us in Public Works. And so if we think about this linear metabolism that most cities have been designed around for decades, we're thinking something differently moving forward into the future. And that's kind of thinking about what would a circular metabolism for a city look like? In part because Boise in particular is at a time in our city's history where these issues are like, we'll just take water supply, for example. The issue is starting to become an issue in Boise, so that we have to take actions to address it, but it's not a crisis yet, right? So we're at a point in our city's history, and there's a lot of different kind of systems that are in that spot where there are some challenges popping up, but they're not so huge that we can't solve them. And so for me and for the staff, for city government, it's an exciting time because we can do some things that can lead to a very different future. And this is a graphic that I pulled from, it was a paper that I was just doing research on regenerative city concepts. And it was from, I think, a professor in Western Australia who was just talking about, and this is not new, circular economy, this isn't breaking news, but for cities to be thinking about these things is a little bit different. And what was really interesting is I looked at each one of the kind of local cycle on the slide. In Boise, we are making progress on each one of these. When we look at the bottom local cycle of organic material, we have the farm, or one of only a handful of cities nationally that own and operate a biosolids application farm that grow local crops. So we're recycling the biosolids that come from the citizens. We have the compost program that Colin mentioned, where we're recycling that organic material. The local cycle of materials up above there, we have the Orange Energy Bag program. That program is interesting because we have companies now reaching out to us to get access to the materials to experiment with other products that they can make. And because we're doing it at scale in Boise, that program, those companies are considering putting manufacturing facilities here in Boise because we have a ready supply for their process. The local cycle of energy, we have the nation's largest geothermal system. We have this incredible foundation to build on that. It couldn't be more circular, right? We pull it out of the aquifer, use it, and inject it back into the aquifer. And then last but not least, that local cycle of water, John alluded to it, thinking about how do we better use surface water resources, but we are looking at recycled water programs. We're initiating that. We're looking in the southeast of Boise for industrial reuse. So the point being is that we do have a vision for where we want to go. There is that carbon neutral goal out there in 2050. It is daunting. It's very, like, thinking through how we get there is hard. But I think in Boise, as we look at on this slide, look at the different components of how we can get there, we're making good progress. It's not perfect, but we have a really strong foundation from which to build upon. So when we talk about priorities and projects that we do on an annual basis, we are leading to something bigger. So the next slide kind of highlights like the tactics and how they tie to strategy and how they tie to kind of the vision of how the city is going to move forward. So when we talk about like an FY23, we're really focusing in on that next 1 to 2 years. And some of that can be tactical. There can be strategy involved there, and I'll break it out there. But, you know, as we think about going from left to right, the tactics are really around some of the specific details, the data, the evidence that we have, the research that we've done, the project preparation. We have strategy that's developed out there 2 to 5 years to try to get, you know, over the next 2 to 5 years, how do we build upon how do the tactics align with the strategy? And then how does the strategy align with the vision? You can see some of the things we have there for our vision. But ultimately, in the end, going back to that previous slide on the circular economy, we want a systems level evolution. We're trying to think about how do we change systems in our community. That is really big and daunting, not impossible, and you have to start somewhere. And so this is all adding context to when we show you our FY23 priorities. And you're going to see here in the next couple of months our FY24 budget process. I just wanted to provide some context to what you're going to be seeing and why some of these projects are happening and why they're priorities, right? Why they're things that we want to make sure that stay to the top of the list. We have a lot of things going on in public works. It's not to suggest there other things aren't important, but if you don't have any if everything's a priority, then nothing's a priority, right? So what you'll start to see, and this will be on an annual basis, when we do the FY20 budget process, let me go back to the previous slide. If you look at the tactics there, that 1 to 2 years, that's where we're going to start getting into framing up what's happening on an FY basis. Now, there could be some visionary things that happen in the next fiscal year. There could be some strategy things that happen in the next 1 to 2 years. But when we think about the FY process, we're really focusing in on that particular year. And there's going to be a snapshot of where kind of things sit, things being initiatives, projects, ideas. And what our plan is, we started doing this last year a little bit with the water renewal CIP, capital improvement plan, but giving you a sense for where these things sit in the process going left to right from an idea or a concept or a strategy or a strategic plan, all the way over to it's been built, it's operational, and now it's kind of that day-to-day operations. So you'll see, we want to give you a better snapshot of kind of what's in the study phase, what's in the idea phase-ish, what's in the strategic planning phase. So the next slide, when we talk about our FY23 priorities, you'll see projects in various forms of stages of this. And when we get into FY24, the budget process, you'll see these things laid out, where you're going to see projects, where they are in the process. So any questions before I go into that FY23 priority slide that's already kind of been set? You all approved. For the commissioners that are new, the commission approved the FY23 budget back in March, April of last year. So we're just affirming that we have these priorities moving forward, but we'll be coming back to you on FY24 as well in the spring. Any questions there before I go to the next slide?
Any questions from the commission? All right, hearing none, back to you.
So going to specifically to 23 and what we got approved by commission last year and we're moving forward with is, one, we are focused on that operations and maintenance piece, the basic foundations of what we provide to citizens. So we operate our water renewal facilities. We have a contract with Republic Services to operate the solid waste program. So that top box there of just making sure that we're providing those day-to-day services, that those touch points with our citizens is top of mind. We need to make sure that we're delivering those. There are, however, other things that we want to get done that are kind of project basis or study basis in FY23 that we're currently working on. On the external focus side, i.e. the projects that are more external to our organization, we're going to be working more on the building and vehicle electrification. So as we transition to 100% clean electricity, we are trying to electrify our buildings, our vehicles as fast as we can to take advantage of that conversion to 100% clean. The green tariff is our ability to work with Idaho Power to expedite our access to 100% renewable energy. So we're negotiating with Idaho Power, working with the PUC on how to set up contracts that allow us to get access to newly constructed renewables that Idaho Power is bringing online, that we can say our power is coming from those facilities. And then the CURBIT strategic plan. CURBIT is the word to describe our solid waste programs. Colin mentioned the reduce and reuse initiative. We're trying to do much more intentional planning around how do you integrate that into our solid waste programs. For example, we currently have every other week recycling for residents. And we often get the question, when are we going to go to weekly recycling? And at first blush, that sounds like a very good idea. You're promoting recycling. And we believe in recycling, so don't misconstrue what I'm about to say. But if we have every week recycling, we are encouraging more and more recycling. That's maybe not the best message to be sending. What if we tried to get ahead of that and reduce and reuse the amount of materials coming in to recycle? So part of what we're trying to get to on the strategic plan for CURBIT is how do we integrate some of these reduce and reuse concepts to reduce the amount of material we have to handle in the first place? Because right now we're just focused on the back end of just receiving it all. How do we get further up in that kind of stream of materials? On the water renewal side, we have the Micron expansion, and we'll have more for you in the coming months and years, frankly, on the Micron project. We're still working with Micron on the basics of setting up what they need associated with the new fab that they're building. One of the strategies that when Colin was talking about what got us here won't get us there, one of the new strategies that we're trying on the water renewal side is to set up program management levels within the water renewal facilities. In the past, we've had one or two maybe construction projects at a time at a water renewal facility. I think those days are behind us. We're doing multiple major projects at a time, in part because they're just needed. Either it's a regulatory requirement or we're replacing aging assets. In order to orchestrate those multiple projects happening at one time, we need another layer of somebody organizing the coordination between those projects. And that's the program management level, watching the finances, watching the risk management, the risk register across projects, et cetera. The Lander Street Water Renewal Facility Phase 2 is the second phase in the reconstruction of Lander Street. That's a complete rebuild of that facility that was built in 1949. And over the next 20 years, we'll completely replace that facility. We're excited about the fact that we got our WIFIA financing. That's been approved. And now we're just making sure that there's a fair amount of paperwork involved with making sure that we're dotting all the I's and crossing the T's to make sure that we can keep that funding flowing. And then the West Boise Water Renewal Facility, we have several improvements out there associated with both redundancy and capacity. And those are some large projects that we're getting kicked off in 23. So those are some of the big external focus projects. And again, there are many other initiatives and projects going on in Public Works. These are the ones that when we talk internally with the leadership team and say, Marcia or Jim says to me, hey, what's the priority here? I've got West Boise Water Renewal Facility improvements, or do you want me to work on this other initiative? Work on West Boise Water Renewal, because that's the one that we need to make sure that gets done. And we're predicating this. Colin will talk about this in a second. You might say, well, how did it get on the list? How does something become a priority? We're evaluating the process for doing that more formally, and we'll probably be sharing that with you in the coming months or year. But basically, it's thinking about the risk of the project not being completed, the size of the project, complexity of the project, ranking those, and kind of coming up with a list of, okay, these are the ones that really need to be focused on in 23. And then on the internal focus side, we do have our organizational structure assessment. We're working through that currently with our consultant team. We hope to have something done probably summer of this year. And we'll be back in front of you sharing that information with you. We do have a big focus on recruitment and retention, working with HR. it's been a huge challenge for all across the city. And we're not just kind of saying, woe is us. We've been working with HR on some new approaches. So for example, we're bringing on 3 recruiters in-house. We've been paying recruiters externally and realizing that why don't we just have those in-house? We have the need, let's bring them in-house, and we can probably do a better job of recruiting if we have that staff internal. We're also setting up HR business partners. So in HR, we're going to have a business partner that we liaison with that is dedicated to public works. So all the issues we have around, whether it's an FMLA question, a salary question, a hiring question, we'll have that person to coordinate with specifically, rather than having to kind of fish around for an answer in HR. That person will help coordinate our issues across HR. We're going to be increasing our internal communications. We consistently hear from staff that that's an area for improvement. Let's put it that way. So we're going to try to up our game on the internal communications piece, just making sure folks are in the loop of what's happening on an annual basis. I think COVID was challenging in that regard. I typically go out to the facilities and would meet with staff and give them updates. I hadn't been doing that for 2.5 years. So I'm looking forward to getting back on that. And then the leadership team within Public Works, the senior managers that attend these commission meetings, we're really trying to make sure that that team is aligned on the big priorities that we have. So we're working on just the leadership team development, being better at managing conflict, right? And trying to make sure that we're having those honest conversations, because what we're being asked to do is big. It's challenging. And if we're not having honest and forthright conversations, not that we're not doing that now, but I think we can do better. That's always evolving. It's always something you can improve on. We're doing some of that work this year for the leadership team, the senior managers. Okay, that's a lot of me talking. I'll stop and open it up to questions. If you don't have any questions for me, I'm going to turn it back over to Colin. He's going to talk a little bit about how are we demonstrating, measuring performance, demonstrating that these priorities are being achieved and that the organization is running well. He's going to talk about that here to close us out. So before I leave, any questions for me?
Any questions from the commission? Commissioner Lockett.
Just a comment. That's a lot. You said you talked a lot, but I think that's a heck of a lot of work. So shout out to you and your people and your teams. I look forward to hearing more. Good work.
Thank you.
Anything else from the commission? Anyone in the chambers? All right, hearing none, back to you.
Thanks, Steve. Chair, commissioners. Actually, before I moved on, I did want to recognize Commissioner Warrants at the last meeting. I think had some real good feedback on providing a little bit more granularity on how we sorted this. So we broke it up into kind of climate, water, renewal, and internal versus external. So hopefully that was helpful. And the other thing that I did want to circle back on, I believe it was Commissioner Warrants again that brought up the importance of communication and engagement around each of these. And so Natalie Monroe, the department's communications manager, is here. And so, with a lot of these primarily on the external side, those go hand in glove with communications and engagement with all of our residents and businesses. So I didn't want to leave that off from the last discussion that we had, because I think it's really important. And then as Steve teed up, part of my role will really be going back to that theme of evolution, how we as a department, Public Works Department, continue to evolve, refine a lot of our processes. One of those is metrics that we're looking at right now. So Steve and I touched on briefly the importance of what we call running the business, providing critical services to residents of Boise. What are those key metrics as a leadership team that we need to be keeping an eye on a monthly basis, quarterly basis, annual basis, that allow us to see some of those key performance indicators for how our department is doing, allow us to make timely intervention. And it's not just on number of breaks that we have in a line. It's also on like people data, how many what's our percentage of vacancies in any given division. So ways that we can keep a finger on the pulse of our department as a whole and really keep track of those key performance indicators. That's something that we'll be refining a lot. Yeah, Steve.
Yeah, I just want to jump in. We have a fair amount of the metrics that we track currently. Like behind my over my shoulder, Marcia Schmelzer is our operations manager, and she has a monthly report that presentation is really well done, and it gets into gory details on preventative maintenance, what percent is getting done, what percent of lines are being cleaned on an annual basis, monthly basis. And then on like the vacancies, we have that information if we need it, but we want to be more intentional about pulling some of these things together and creating a dashboard that's kind of like an executive level dashboard of metrics that maybe you all would see periodically, but also kind of that granularity going down to, if I'm a frontline person, I'm a maintainer out at West Boise, how do I connect my work up? So maybe it's the preventative maintenance numbers that I'm concerned about that I need to hear more of, like to give me a sense of how these things are working together.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. That's a great add-on. That, what I've found so far is that we have all the data exists. It's essentially what's our process for bubbling up the data that as a leadership team we really need to keep tabs on. Something we've really thought long and hard about is what an annual report card looks like for us internally, for residents, for the commission, essentially at the end of fiscal year 23, looking back on how we did, what we did well, areas for improvement, lessons learned. And so that's also a concept that we'll be moving forward, how we can take a lot of this stuff that we present, and then rather than moving on to fiscal year 24, it really takes a second to pause and reflect on where we did well and where we need to do better. This third one is really important. Just looking at Steve mentioned, how we look at what is a priority. It's an evolution, and we'll continue as a department to get better and continue flexing that muscle. But you also see on there the inclusion of deprioritization, because one of the things that we are really good, and I think the city overall is really good at, is saying yes to a lot of things. But when you have growing levels and growing numbers of priorities, there's also got to be some really earnest and open conversations about what's coming off the plate in order for our staff to maintain efficiency and effectiveness. We got to lean into some hard conversations about, okay, if we're going to tackle this new priority, what does that mean coming off the plate, and how do we balance that going forward in a way that we can maintain all of the promises we make to residents and businesses, and the levels of service that we need to continue to provide. And then you'll see a recurring theme here. Steve touched on it a little bit earlier, but ensuring that staff are part of this. So not just putting priorities on a PowerPoint presentation, sending those out at the beginning of the year, but ensuring that our employees know how their work is connected to the bigger picture and where we're going into all the vision pieces that Steve talked about, whether you're a mechanic at West Boise, whether you're a water analyst here, whether you're in utility billing, making sure that our folks, that our team know how they're connected and how their work is part of this bigger picture and where they fit in and why it matters. This is tied hand in hand with that internal communication strategy that Steve mentioned. So I know there's a lot on here, and we'll be coming back to you as we continue to refine this and build this out. But we felt it was important to give you kind of a sneak preview on a lot of the work that as a leadership team will be undertaking in the year that kind of wraps around all of the priorities that Steve presented. So with that, I would also be happy to stand for any questions.
Right. Any questions from the commission?
Commissioner Gravitt, I have a question, or I actually have a comment, not a question.
Yes, Commissioner Ellis.
Kind of what Robin said on the previous slide is there's a lot. I kept thinking of my days at HP, and I felt like a lot of the things you were saying is a really well-run business, but you could say that as a well-run organism. The fact that everybody from here to here knows how they're connected and how they're reaching the goals together is paramount. It's so simple, but it's also complicated. So I commend you on looking at it that way. And I'm really curious what the report card is, because it's like, well, do you compare to another city? Do you compare, where do you start, and how do you think that city's more important than it's it's a lot. I can't wait to see more.
Chair, Commissioner Ellis, thank you for the comment. And I think we typically, one of the metrics that we look at to compare to other cities is like a monthly rate, right, for water renewal. It's fair, but there's really, it can be apples and oranges because, we're providing a different level of service, not necessarily better than, but a different level of service than say a Spokane or Seattle or a Nampa. So some of those can be really tricky to start doing benchmarking with other cities. I think we're really focused on we told you that we were going to do something this year. Citizens of Boise commissioners, how did we do? Did we get those done? And if we didn't, what have we learned so that we can adjust moving forward? We made these commitments, and it's not always going to be perfect. And I think the thing that Colin is bringing to the table now is just let's get this started and don't let the perfect get in the way of good. And so we're going to experiment with some things this year, and maybe you'll give us some feedback like, yeah, that's not really helping me. It's like, okay, well, we can go back and adjust. But it's really kind of looking internally to how we're performing as an organization, maybe less comparison to other cities per se.
I was just thinking your stakeholders are everybody.
All right. Anything else from the commission?
Yes, Chair, this is Commissioner Wernz. I had a question.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Hickman. Also for the follow-up that you provided from the comments or questions I had last time. I was thinking along the same lines as Commissioner Ellis about the annual report. And I know you don't know what it is going to be yet, but what occurred to me, of course, was, is this for the department? Is this for the commission? Is this for the citizens? Is this for the ratepayers? And obviously it can't be for everybody, and you're just going to have to dip a toe in the water first and get going. But those are going to be the important kinds of things to think about. If you don't know your audience, of course, it can be a rough go. So thank you.
Sure. Commissioner, thanks for the comment. Really appreciate that. And I think that's spot in. And I think that could potentially be an area where Public Works Commission helps us refine that and make sure we hit the mark on what we're presenting. Is that meaningful? But the comment on who's the audience, who's going to be seeing it is well placed. So thank you.
Chair, I also have a comment.
Commissioner Morgan.
I find the Curbit strategic plan super interesting and would love if we could be able to include that maybe in the next climate subcommittee meeting. I don't know if we have that scheduled currently, but I think that's really relevant and would love to dig in deeper with you all if it's applicable for the commission to do so.
Chair, Commissioner Morgan, yes, that's our intent is to start to. So you see here the climate subcommittee is covering a pretty wide range of topics under which
Right.
Curbit strategic. So we would be bringing that to the subcommittee. I need to loop back with Peter and the team just to figure out where we are on the process for kicking it off. So we'll be in touch, and at the next subcommittee meeting we can give you an update.
Perfect. Yeah, just wanted to express interest.
Thank you.
Commissioner Grummet.
Yes. Is that Commissioner Ellis?
Yes. I wanted to mention that Commissioner Lawrence and I were just talking over here. I don't think that he's been assigned to a subcommittee yet. No, is that right? Okay.
Chair, Commissioner Lawrence, we haven't done that yet, in part because we have two subcommittees currently, the water renewal and the climate subcommittees. In order to, the intent is to have that as more of a working group. And so we're trying to avoid quorum. So we just have two commissioners assigned to those subcommittees. There could be more in the future. We're debating but those are where we started. So that would be the reason you're not currently on a subcommittee, but we can, over time we can flip commissioners in and out and folks can take turns. So Chair, anything to add there? Because you and I have been working on that.
Yes, and there may be other subcommittees as the sorts of realms of work become useful to staff for noodling through ideas as we do move forward in achieving these priorities and strategizing next steps. So the possibilities are there for the future. We've talked about different ideas like the public arts master plan and community engagement, things like that. But the working groups are already still fairly in their nascence, so we're still working out some kinks to how those work. But yes, if there's interest, definitely let us know, and we can think through how we manage involvement in those working groups in the future.
Okay, hearing no chair, commissioners, hearing no more questions, I will turn it back over to you, Chair.
All right, thank you. All right, and that gets us to, that's a nice segue to the next item on our agenda, which is the subcommittee reports. And I will turn it over. So it looks like the first update is on the Water Renewal Subcommittee report, and I will turn it over to staff, and I'm happy to offer input as needed here as well.
And Chair, we included those reports if there were any questions on those. We weren't necessarily going to have a presentation or anything formal, more of submitted in the packet, and wonder if there were any questions from the commission.
Awesome, thank you. So the two agendas, or the two minutes from the subcommittees, are available as part of the agenda packet. Are there any questions or comments from the commission on those?
Mr. Chair, this is Commissioner Warrant, and I don't believe I got those in that package, or maybe it's an oversight, but I just had the irrigation assessment documentation and the agenda, but it's possible that I fumbled there.
No. Commissioner Gravatt, that's all that was in there too, is the minutes from last time, and then the irrigation memo. And it stopped there in the packet.
Gotcha. So all of the items are available on the website and linked in the subcommittee report section of today's meeting.
Okay.
On the meeting site, but we can definitely follow up at our next meeting if there are any questions related to the subcommittee reports as they are currently.
We'll double check. I'm sorry, Chair. We'll double check on the subcommittee reports. Let me confirm with Kathy what if they were submitted with, because there were two agendas that I'm seeing in the folder. And I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page.
I just put the link in the chat. They are all on the web page.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
And I'll mention that too. So for the people that said they would be here, the commissioners that said they would be here, we didn't get an invite to the Zoom. And so we'd like to get a Zoom invite in the future because we can't see anything. Yeah.
So Commissioner Ellis and Commissioner Burns, if that did not happen, then I apologize. I am working to implement some new processes. And so if that was an oversight this time, that's my apology, but it is always the intent that all of you always receive the invite.
Yeah, we'll make sure you get the Zoom next time around.
Thank you.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
All right, so we can follow back up at our next meeting if there are any questions or comments related to the subcommittee reports once we've had enough time to review those and move forward in that work. But I don't think that there is anything else on the agenda. Is there any more business to come before the committee today?
Chair, I think we're good. Thank you.
All right. And with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I motion that we adjourn.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and second. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, the same sign. Hearing none, the motion carries and we are adjourned. Happy New Year, everybody.